Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.rent. I'm your host today, Justin Lewis. Today, we are going to talk about how to weave better stories for yourself and your players playing Dungeons and Dragons. And today, we are probably going to be talking about doing that online because today I have a very special guest. I'm joined by Andre Clayton of the Foundry VTT team. So, how's it going, Andrew?
Doing great. Thank you so much, Justin. Really appreciate the invitation to join the show, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you and your community about a topic that I care a lot about.
Excellent. Let's dive right in. First, let's give the listener, if they're not familiar with Foundry or VTTs in general, or you yourself, Andre Clayton, um, give the listener just a brief background of all of those things as far as you see fit.
Sure. Happy to do that. So, Foundry Virtual Tabletop is a software for playing games like D&D, including D&D, but many games as well, online in a self-hosted virtual tabletop environment where we have a pretty unique business model. It's a one-time purchase with a perpetual license. So you as the game master can purchase the software and then you own it forever and you get all of the updates we release to the software. Your players don't have to purchase the software. You just connect via a web browser. So it's all web-based. It's built using modern web technologies, and one of our proudest and strongest attributes is our very developer-friendly API that allows for the development of modules and systems that augment the software. And that's what allows Foundry to have so many different game systems supported, like over 250 different game systems that you can play on Foundry, and over 2,500 different modules that you can install that expand or augment or enhance the functionality of the software in some way or another. And so, we're a tool that's really designed to allow GMs to tell powerful and immersive and memorable stories with a really high level of production value, using a lot of great tooling that lets you deliver experiences that really bring your player into the action and really help enhance their imagination or comprehension of a scene that you're depicting. And we love building the software. I am the original creator of the software, but now there's a whole team of us involved in making Foundry VTT. And we've got all kinds of projects that we're involved in addition to making the core software, with regards to content partnerships with amazing publishers like Paizo. We're just releasing Kingmaker for Foundry VTT right now for Pathfinder 2e. We've got some other really big projects that are ongoing or underway or coming out soon. We've got a brand new version of the software that we're working on creating. So we're very, very busy, and we're up to a whole lot. But if you're not familiar with Foundry, the best place to start is at our website, which is foundryvtt.com. And on the homepage, there's a nice sort of introductory video that gives you like an introductory tour to everything that Foundry has to offer. And that's probably a great place to start if you're not already familiar. But I hope it's something that many of you already use or know about or are thinking about. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it yet, I hope you discover it to be something that is a godsend to you, that can really help you and your groups if you find yourself playing online or in person. It can be good for that too.
Yeah, actually, it is a great software if you use battle maps, but you use like TV screens or things like that as the battle maps. That's a great way to pair it in person. Our listener can range from never been a DM and they're preparing to be a DM, to people who have reached out to me saying, yeah, they played first edition D&D and they've kind of been doing it this whole time. So I'm curious, and I'm sure they're curious too. What sparked the idea for Foundry, and what made you actually decide to make it happen? Because that's a very long road in between those two
Sure.
instances.
Yeah, so I guess most of my life I've been really involved in gaming, both tabletop, computer gaming. I think that's an important background that leads me a little bit to like the software side of things. And I've always had sort of tech hobby projects going on, something or other. And so it was several years ago in 2018 that I found myself kind of in between projects, and the gaming group I was playing with, we were thinking about starting a new campaign, and we had historically been playing on using some other online tools because we played remotely, we played online, and we'd had a good but not great experience with other products, and there were a lot of things that kind of I, as the DM of that group, really wished, like, oh, I wish I could do this, or oh, it'd be so cool if I could do this, or wouldn't it be awesome if, like, when we were exploring these maps, I could, do this other thing. Um, and all of those ideas just kind of built up to a point where I was like, well, maybe I'll try putting something together. And it was a sort of good moment of opportunity where web technologies were at a place of some maturity. Some technologies had reached a place where they were really good choices to work with. So, modern HTML Canvas, WebGL, new JavaScript features, WebSockets. I won't get into the gory technical details, aside from to say, like, a lot of the building blocks to make a good VTT were available to work with, and it was sort of a matter of thinking about what would be a good way to formulate the software and my ideas in a way that could take advantage of those technologies and really harness their potential. And so Foundry was born pretty quickly after that, because it turned out that it actually was really working to put these ideas into practice and start putting something together. And before long, there was kind of a viable prototype. And then I faced some very serious decisions about, like, how seriously do I want to pursue this? Because not only, was it something that was looking very promising for me and what I wanted, but it turns out that as I was sharing it around, a little friend group, and, everyone's response to it was very positive. And so I had to decide, like, well, maybe I should see how many people are interested in this. So I started a Patreon, a Patreon membership where I could share details about the project, and people started following along and staying tuned and being interested and really engaged with what I was doing, and everything really grew from there. And I think as terrible as, like, 2020 was for all kinds of reasons for a lot of people, the timing kind of did, I guess, work out a little bit for this project, at least, that there I was, kind of a year and a half, 2 years into development of this new thing, and suddenly everyone's kind of thinking, oh, maybe we need to start playing online now. And so that kind of helped to really grow the community around Foundry and bring a lot of people to the community. And the rest is history, I guess, as they say. The launch of the product went well, and so I started growing the team, and now there's 9 of us that develop the core Foundry software, and then probably another 9 or 10 beyond that are working on various content related projects. So it's been a whirlwind couple years, going from just this being an idea for my own group to a business with employees and full-time everyone. And it's been a big change in my life, and a really exciting one. And I'm really thankful that I got a little bit lucky, sort of right place, right idea, right time, but also had the courage to kind of go after it and see what I could do.
Wow. I'll tell you. So I used to do, this isn't my first podcast. It's not even my second. My first podcast was a personal development podcast, and we often talked about business. And I'll tell you, hearing your story a little bit, definitely I have the itch to kind of dig into that, but we might have to do that off screen or something. But 2020 aside, right? We all know that the world was basically waiting at home for 2020 to end that year,
Mm-hmm.
and twiddling our thumbs. And so we all, played online D&D. But now, why should someone consider online D&D and or sorry, not and or, but uh, you know, add it to the list of things that they should do instead of just doing in person. Does that make sense?
Hmm. It does. I mean, I think I'd start by saying, like, if you have an in-person group that you love and that meets regularly, and that, you know, you have a great relationship with the people at the table, like, cherish that. Do not let it go. You have something special, and you know, be thankful for that. Um, that doesn't mean you can't play online, or you can't also play online with, you know, with other friends or another group, or anything else. But um, you know, I would be wrong to sort of disavow the magic of the in-person experience. But the reality is that's not practical for everyone, and there's so many more reasons why playing in person doesn't work out than reasons why it does. You know, the timing doesn't work, or the location doesn't work, or you don't actually like the people that much, or you're not really vibing, and you're not wanting to tell the same sort of stories. And it turns out that there's people online that do want to tell the same sort of stories that you do have a great relationship with, where your schedule does match up with. And the only thing that doesn't match is you just don't happen to live in the same town. And so, you know, I think the thing to ask yourself is, how important is, like, the location bit versus all of the other things that go into having an amazing role-playing experience. And, you know, sometimes the stars line up and everything works out, that in-person group is, you know, that's the dream, I think. But there's lots of great reasons to look online to find the right kind of game for you, the right game system for you, the right time to play, the right, you know, at table expectations or tone or storytelling. And those are things that are a lot easier to find when you have the whole universe of TTRPG players to, you know, to connect with and to draw from, than just who happens to live down the street. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of part of the way I think about it. But, you know, I would also say that for groups that maybe have the choice, like, we could do either, or, you know, I think that the experience of playing online is a little bit different. It leans into some things a little bit more heavily, and it maybe shies away from some things a little bit more heavily. And so I do think it is subtly, but importantly, a little bit of a different game experience. And I think that that's something that suits people very well. It's also something that can cause frustration to people, and maybe just, like, that mode of play isn't for you. And so if you've tried it, you probably know which camp you're in. And if you haven't, then, you know, I think it's interesting to discover, like, what the differences are and what you like about it and what you don't. And of course, the quality of your experience will depend a lot on the people, the platform, the story. So, you know, it's hard to judge anything like, this is for me or this isn't for me. But it's nuanced in a lot of ways.
I couldn't agree more. Honestly, just thinking about 2020, and you know, the biggest hurdle of playing D&D or tabletop games, as far as a DM, maybe not the biggest hurdle, but definitely the first hurdle is finding players. First of all, right, getting people to say, "Yeah, I'd love to play with you." And I mean, logically, like you said, when you open up your field to anyone, right, who has connection to the internet, it makes it a lot easier to find people. And actually, to that end, I would recommend to the listener, you should work on being good at both versions of gameplay, right, in person or online, and work at enjoying both, because if you can do that, you will always be able to find players and campaigns and stuff. Like, it's just a better way to be, rather than limiting yourself to one or the other, in my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So you did mention there are nuances to both online and in person, and I actually wanted to talk about that, dig in a little bit. So what would you say are some of the challenges that you might have to overcome when doing online play, and what are some really cool things that you can do online that you can't do, or maybe would be really awkward or weird to do in person?
You're probably going to have to cut me off at some point, because I bet I could talk about this for hours. I think about this a lot, because it really informs, in a large sense, like, what is it that we're trying to build? What is our product, and who is it for, and why? Because it's very difficult to do everything, and if you try and be everything for everybody, you probably aren't going to really succeed at whatever your main focus is or your core mission is. So in the interest of time, I guess my answer will be from the perspective of Foundry Virtual Tabletop. But I will say that that answer is not the universal answer for playing online. That's just my answer with respect to the software that we make. I think that playing online is really fascinating because it changes a lot of the expectations for the game master in a meaningful way, in terms of expectations around preparation, expectations around capacity to improvise, expectations around what happens when the players go off script. I think that one of the things about playing online, especially in Foundry, is it's such a fantastic platform for visual, auditory, immersive storytelling. It really leans into the fact that when you're digital, you have all of these amazing assets that you can draw from: maps and artwork and portraits and tokens and music. And all of these things can help you tell your story in a way that is so visually engaging and immersive. But part of what happens as a result of that is that there is a little bit of expectation sometimes to prepare all of those things. It's one thing to say oh, I have a collection of 75,000 tokens. It's probably about what I have. In terms of individual images of different creatures or characters that you can use. But the pressure to prepare, which ones are we going to use, or which maps are ready to go, or which pieces of artwork are the ones that we're using this week. There can be kind of just more expectation on the GM sometimes to set those things up and to do prep work before the session than there is when you're just playing in person, and everyone kind of knows you're not going to have those things. You're not going to have the beautiful printout map, maybe every once in a while, but usually no. You're not going to have the perfect mini for every creature that you encounter. You're not going to have this beautiful illustrated artwork that you put up on the wall for every scene that your party explores. And so the expectations just shift a little bit. And I think this is something that some GMs really lean into because they love the idea that this is my hobby, and I'm happy to prep 6 hours for a 4-hour session because I freaking love it. And I just want that moment of those 4 hours with my friends to be just amazing. But that's not for everybody, and it doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be. But I think there is and I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea about our software. There's nothing inherently about Foundry that requires you to spend that amount of time preparing for a game session. But it is sort of the social contract that exists online, with so many artists making amazing artwork and musicians making music and putting it all at your fingertips. It sort of is raising the bar and raising the stakes about what's available to you, and therefore what you might be expected to engage with or to prepare or to present to your players. And so it's a really interesting paradox. I think that with that increased power comes sort of increased obligation. And does playing online make playing easier? It's complicated. Yes? Question mark? It does. It can. But it also doesn't, and it also can't sometimes, because it means that you find yourself, spending more time on some other things. But, maybe the time that you're spending on prep is time that you're not spending on a long commute to drive to wherever your game night is, or something like that. So, there's puts and takes everywhere. But I do think it's really different. And I think that, we try and lean into allowing game masters using our software to have the sort of most spectacular experience that they can. And so, we do kind of build a power tool like for the GM that wants to go that extra mile and do all of that prep. Like, we want to give that game master as much capability and power as they can handle in the software. And then at the same time, we want to think about like, how can we make setup and how can we make things easier and accessible to people that, any, whether you're, sort of hardcore about that or not, anything we can make faster and easier and more approachable is a win for everybody. But yeah, it's just a really interesting situation where, like, because we are that kind of, I guess power tool is a sort of fair way to think about it. It comes along with a lot of extra, considerations about like how you use it and the time that you spend with it. And is that something that you enjoy, or is that something that comes as a tax to you that makes you feel like you're paying more for your gaming experience? And different people respond differently.
Those are really interesting points you bring up. And the first thing that comes to mind is you're absolutely right in that it is a power tool, right? Like if you are going to use a VTT, right, you have already made the decision that you are going to try and go a little bit more all out than maybe, the average DM. And that's because, and I've said this on other podcast episodes before, but at its core, a role playing game, right? Like the barest bare of a role playing game just consists of a story, people, something to record the story, maybe, and an agreed upon set of rules, right? And I know people who do, theater of the mind over the phone or on Zoom calls, right? If you're going to use a VTT, then you've already made that decision to try and make it spectacular, right? And the next thought that comes to my mind is also we have so much content that we can consume in the form of, shows like Critical Role, Dimension 20, High Rollers from the UK, things like that are a little bit more towards that spectacular level. And seeing tools like these VTTs, we do start to think, why can't I do that? So I definitely agree with everything you're saying. And as far as the accessibility, that was one thing I did want to talk about. So as a technological neophyte, I would kind of think of VTTs and think, what are, in your opinion, like what are the technical specifications you'd have to have for like your computer to just run a VTT fairly well without technical issues? And what are some ways that you could hopefully mitigate any technical issues that might pop up?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So, different VTTs are going to be different in that regard. Some of them are built using a game engine like Unreal or Unity, where everyone has to install a piece of software. Some are just very lightweight, web-based. You just pop onto a website and you go. Foundry's a little bit in the middle, I would say, in terms of it's not the most lightweight, but it is relatively lightweight because it's easy for the game master to install and everyone else just joins with a web browser. In terms of our like technical system requirements, they're relatively modest, but because Foundry is a tool that really leaves it up to the GM, like how big do you go? The requirements for people playing do depend on sort of what the game master does. So for example, Foundry can do things like it can use big like video maps, or it can use map images that are extremely large, like 16,000 pixel square. But that doesn't mean that everyone can do that. So like on your laptop or on your computer, you have a GPU, whether it's integrated or a discrete card, and that GPU has like a maximum size that it can do. And so, it really does depend a little bit on what your GM is doing. But for like basic usage, any laptop or PC that you purchased in the last 6 or 7 years is going to work just fine with Foundry VTT. We don't have a spectacularly high bar in terms of technical requirements. One of the probably the biggest technical requirement that we do have that is a struggle for some of our users is the nature of networking, because we, unlike some other platforms, we are self-hosted. That is a blessing, but that is also a challenge in some ways. What that means is that as the DM, you're running Foundry on your computer. All of the files that you're using, the maps, the music, the tokens, it's all stuff that you have right on your computer. You own your own files and you use your own files and you own your own data. It's not like some cloud service that, like, if you stop paying for it, you lose it, or if the website goes down, you can't run your session because like someone else's website went out. The great thing about it being self-hosted is you're in control. It's your computer and you can play as long as your computer is working, and there's something that like is empowering about that. But it also means that, among other things, your players need to be able to connect to your computer, and we don't actually control your home wireless network or your home router. And so, we can't solve some problems for people in terms of like how your player gets connected to you. We have a lot of support for, working through that and troubleshooting it. It can be as easy as you have to do nothing. It can be as difficult as you have to go to your router and add a port forwarding rule. And that is technically daunting to people. So yeah, there's pros and cons of it. We do have, I should be clear, we do have a couple of really great partnered hosting service providers where if for whatever reason you don't want to or can't navigate the technical requirement of hosting Foundry yourself, you can pay a modest amount and one of our partners will host a server for you that is always available for you and your friends to log into with zero headaches attached. But yeah, these are the sorts of things that are tough to navigate, and it is tough sometimes with users who might not necessarily understand, like, why can't you make it just work? And it's tough to not always have a great answer to that. It's like, because the internet is a little bit complicated, and how traffic gets from one place to another, it's not as simple as you might think.
On the heels of that somewhat technical question, I think we're coming down to the end of our talk today. I do want to ask one question before we sort of wrap up that is also technical, maybe, but what AI is sort of this buzzword right now, artificial intelligence, all that jazz. In your view, what do you see being the developments in the realm of AI or generative experiences as it pertains to VTTs?
Yeah, great question. Tough question. I think generative models are evolving and improving faster than most of us are able to really comprehend and keep up with. I think the improvements in quality of output from generative models is really impressive. Now, there are very crucially and very importantly ethical and legal issues at play here in terms of how those results are produced and how we should feel about them. But setting those aside for a moment, and that is a fairly big but focusing a little bit more on the technology itself, I think that generative assets, generative content is inevitably going to be part of the landscape of role playing. I think it's unavoidable. I think that there's a certain hallmark of role playing experiences about improvisation and collaborative storytelling, and the desire to communicate ideas, creative ideas, quickly in a way that allows everyone at the table to then intake those ideas, be inspired by them, and then respond. And one of the amazing things about, generative, whether it's text or image or video or even audio, the ability for it to take an idea and then give you something tangible to react to or respond to that expands upon that idea or heightens it or takes it to, a next level of depth. I think there's not clear answers about how this is going to work or how it's going to affect the way that people role play, but I think it's inevitable that it will. The ability for, as the DM, for you to be in real time live improvising and say, you walk into the town and there's a market, and in front of the market there's a juggler who's juggling balls woven of all of the different elements of magic, fire and frost and electricity and thunderbolts of force erupting out, and the crowd is watching with rapt attention as a little pickpocket goes around and takes coins from unsuspecting people's garments. And you're just saying that, and as you're saying it, an image is displayed of that very scene. Like, interpreting voice into prompt, and interpreting prompt into image, and interpreting image into a stimulus that then comes back to your storytelling and that people can respond to. It's unbelievably powerful conceptually. And I think it's something that will change the way that we role play for sure. Now, what's it take to get there? I think there's technical challenges to solve, like how would a technology platform make it to where you can have that kind of experience where the GM says the thing and lo and behold, the image of it appears and everyone's like, I see it now, I'm there. How do you get there? Well, there's technical problems to solve, but as I said, there's also ethical problems to solve, and how that artwork gets generated is a very contentious and rightfully so topic. And so I think while the technology problem is one that's very exciting to me, to others, it's a problem that is not really appropriate to try and bring to life until I think some of the the ethical concerns about sourcing of training data, about generation of results, about credit or compensation or even consent of the people whose work has been used to create these results is better handled. And so it's we're at the cutting edge of this stuff, and it cuts, in addition to being exciting. And so I think, I'm very excited about where this might lead. But, I think it's going to be a little bit of time until it becomes normative. But I do think it's inevitable that this is really going to fundamentally alter the way that we play games.
Absolutely. I definitely think the world in 5-10 years is going to look a lot more like the Jetsons. Maybe not so much in flying cars or Rosie the robot, but I don't know. Things are definitely changing. But thank you so much, Andrew, for joining me on this conversation and talking to my listener here. Before we let you go, can you tell my listener how can they reach out to you, support you, see what you're up to, and possibly connect with you?
Absolutely. So the best place to start is at foundryvtt.com. So if you're not familiar with our software yet, that's the best place to go. If you are familiar or you want to get more involved, we have an official Discord server, discord.gg/foundryvtt. We have an amazing community where, like-minded TTRPG enthusiasts who love technology and love Foundry VTT and are eager to share their tips and tricks and experiences with you, help out, are able to be found. It's a really wonderful community. I encourage everyone to check it out. We are available on socials, Twitter /FoundryVTT, YouTube, Foundry VTT, Twitch. We have a Twitch channel. We'll be live on Twitch next week with a development update of our latest and greatest version. Some very exciting announcements and first looks and things coming there. And yeah, we have a Patreon as well. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, this all sort of started on Patreon. We do still have a Patreon for anyone who just loves what we're doing so much that you want to like show a little bit extra support or something. You can do that there. It's incredibly appreciated. It is not required. The whole business model that we operate on is a one-time purchase. You don't have to subscribe to anything. It's just if you love what we're doing so much that you want to shower us with your affection, you may do so at your discretion. The best place to interact with me and the team is on our Discord server. We're very active there, and we love chatting with the community about what we're doing. So do check it out, and I hope to see you there.
Excellent. Well, listener, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and I am 100% certain that you learned something today, or at least have something to chew on mentally, and hopefully it nourishes your body and soul. We'll be back next week for another amazing episode. Until then, friend, let's go ahead and roll initiative. Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First, tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay, all right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/subscribe/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, creating sarcasm, puns, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.